Hope for Families helps people who have a stage 3 drug or alcohol problem get their life together before they lose everything. You're probably thinking, what the heck is a stage 3 drug or alcohol problem? So I'm going to tell you 2 stories so you'll know exactly what I mean. The first story is about an adult named Steve, and the second story is about a teenager named Eric. Let's start with Steve. Okay, Steve's a business guy. He's married, he's got 3 kids, and for the most part, he's made responsible decisions. He and his wife Amy have worked super hard to build a good life and raise 3 kids. But for the last few years, Steve's drinking seems to get more and more and more. Just last week, Steve and Amy got in this huge argument because they went to dinner club on Tuesday night with their friends, and Steve drank too much, and Amy was furious. She felt so embarrassed and humiliated that of course they got into another argument. Now Steve knows that sometimes the drinking goes a little too far, but on the other hand, Amy also exaggerates the whole situation. But even Steve feels a little embarrassed about how he acted at dinner club the other night. So he promises Amy, okay, I promise, no more drinking during the week, and on the weekends, I promise not to have more than 4 beers at a time. Amy, of course, doesn't really believe him. She's heard all this before, but somewhere in there, she's a little hopeful that he means it and he's going to stick to it. So Wednesday is the first day of Steve's no drinking during the week plan. That day goes off pretty well. Work was fine, he comes home, not a drop to drink, goes to bed, everything's fine, and Amy thinks, hey, maybe he actually means it. Maybe he's really going to stick to it. Thursday rolls around. Steve goes to work, he has a pretty decent day at work, and he's on his way home, pulling into his driveway, and he notices his neighbor James is next door mowing. Gets out of his car, waves to James, and then James says, oh, hey, Steve, come here, I want to talk to you about something. James walks into the garage and grabs a cold beer. He grabs another one for Steve and says, hey man, have a cold one with me. And without thinking, Steve grabs the beer, opens it up, takes one drink, and Amy walks out on the porch and sees him. I know, right? You can imagine what's about to happen. Amy gives him this look, this dead stare. It's like lasers going through him. She makes sure that he knows that she's ticked. So with a big sigh, Steve walks into the house and he knows, great, here we go again. Soon as he steps foot in the house, Amy says, I thought you weren't going to be drinking anymore during the week. And Steve says, good grief, Amy, all I was doing was having a sip of beer with James. I mean, you want me to be rude to the neighbor? Amy says, no, all I want is for you to keep your dang promises. Steve gets furious. He grabs his jacket, walks out of the house without another word. Guess where he goes? That's right, he drives to the bar. Walks in, sits down, orders 2 shots and 1 beer, and proceeds to drink for the next 4 hours while talking to the guy sitting on the stool next to him about how his wife's become so controlling and nagging. I mean, they used to love to have a few drinks together. They used to have so much fun. And now all she wants to do is criticize him and stay on his case. It's like nothing he ever does is good enough for her. As all this is going on, of course, Amy is blowing up his phone. She's texting, she's calling, and he just keeps hitting ignore until eventually his phone dies. It starts to get late, but Steve's still so mad at Amy that he doesn't want to go home. So he calls his single friend Jeff and says, hey Jeff, can I come crash on your couch tonight? Jeff says sure, and then Steve drives himself over to Jeff's house, stumbles in, and passes out. He wakes up at about 5 in the morning with his head like super spinning, going 100 miles an hour, and immediately he feels terrible. He plugs his phone in the wall, charges it up enough to see that Amy has called like 35 times. Now he's super dreading going home. But he grabs his stuff, pulls it together, walks out the door before Jeff even wakes up, and goes home. And when he walks in, Amy feels a little bit of relief that he's okay, but mostly she's just so furious at him, she can't even speak to him. Then the whole cycle starts all over. They get into an argument. Steve makes more promises. Amy says how she doesn't believe him. He always makes those promises. This story can go on for years. This is an example of what stage 3 alcoholism looks like. The hallmarks are binge drinking episodes that tend to get out of hand, followed by a lot of remorse, regret, and shame, arguing with someone close to you about it, making promises to do better, and then eventually breaking those promises. Okay, that's a story about what stage 3 alcoholism looks like in an adult relationship.